For myself, we talked about my writing, David, and yes, by all means it was successful, but there was a part of me, inside of me, that said, there's something more for me. I was writing books about psychology, your erroneous sounds, pulling your own strings, the sky's the limit. All of them were doing well. All of them were bestsellers. It was all, but inside of me, I was shifting. There was a calling to something else, and I could see the shift taking place in my life. And the shift was, it was more in the direction of spirituality. It was more in the direction of higher consciousness. I began to become excited and thrilled by reading people like Krishnamurti, by reading people like Muktananda. And I remember going to my agent and I said, I want to write a book about how to take some of these great spiritual ideas. He said, no. You're going to write a book about sex. He said, this is going to sell. This is like Dr. Ruth has got one, but you're way better than Dr. Ruth. You know, and he's going on and on. And he said, and then I've got a second book for you, and we're going to do a 2-book deal. And you're going to write a book about how to make money. You know, Wayne Dyer's approach to making money. And I'd say, Artie, I said, I can't do that. I said, I have to write about it. He said, no, nobody's going to buy this stuff. He said, that's the airy-fairy stuff. That's out there. That's all that new agey stuff. He said, you don't want to. I said, but I have to write that. That's what I'm living. That's what I'm feeling. It's so exciting. And I remember submitting the proposal to him, and he said, all right, I'll send it in. And they reluctantly, they didn't give me much of an advance at all because they didn't even believe in it. But off I went. There was a strong inner kind of feeling that I had something greater to give. I had something that I had to do that was beyond just going through the motions, just doing what I had already mastered, what I knew how to do. I remember when I made the shift, even though there was a little bit of fear, I remember feeling probably the freest that I'd felt ever in my life. I wasn't motivated by whether people are going to buy it, how much money I'm going to make, whether people are going to put me on a bestseller list. Those became external kind of factors. Those became things that started to chase me rather than me chasing it. Basically, I think, David, what I'm trying to say to you is that you get to a place in your life where you start to be guided by something that's larger than yourself. Just stay aligned with what you're here for and stay in harmony with Spirit, with God, with Source. Stay there. And as you stay there, the meaning phase of your life begins to take over. And once you cross over into the afternoon of your life, it's impossible to go back.
Wait, Monday? You can't keep telling me Monday. If it was coming through, it would come through like 5 Mondays ago.
Well, we can take a pause here for a second.
You are not telling me this right now. What do you mean? They're replacing me? You don't know what to tell me? This movie meant everything to me. I bought them this movie. It's my movie. This movie meant everything to me. Damn it.
David, why don't we take it from where Wayne was talking about the shift? We can just continue from there.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, this shift, this movement from ambition to meaning, from the morning to the afternoon of your life, generally it's preceded by what we call a quantum moment. Sounds strange perhaps to use a term like that, but quantum moment really refers to the characteristics of what it is like when you have what Maslow called a peak experience. The first of these qualities, there's 4 of them. The first of them is that it's very vivid. The second quality or characteristic of these quantum moments is that it's a surprise. And the third characteristic of these quantum moments is that they are benevolent. They always feel good. The fourth and final quality is that it's enduring. That is, it isn't just something that comes and then goes and it's out the window. It lasts with you forever. For example, I left drinking behind in my life 21 years ago. And I couldn't even imagine that I could have given it up because I'd always had 2 or 3 beers every single day for the previous 10, 15, 20 years. I couldn't even remember a day when I hadn't. And I knew that I had to make that change. And it was 4:05 a.m. in the morning. I could remember the clock when it turned. I woke up and there was like a breeze in the room, something that I'd never experienced before. The smell of roses. This was 21 years ago now. I can tell you what was hanging on the closet, the hook that I had there. On the mirror there, I had a cartoon that I had there. I can still see that thing exactly as if it happened this morning. The vividness of this is something that I've never ever been able to forget. I can remember how surprised I was at what was happening at that time. It was almost as if some kind of force had taken over, and I was just amazed by it.
So if you're lucky this happens to you?
David, it has nothing to do with luck. It's like when the moment is right, when you are in a different state, in a different place in your life, exactly what is supposed to happen will happen for you. The low points in your own life, these times when you think that nothing could go any worse, oftentimes are the things that we need to propel ourselves to a higher place. Let me give you an example. The night before that moment that I just described to you, I had taken my entire family, 5 children, and my wife, and we had all gone to this restaurant. And like I always did, every single time I went to a restaurant, I ordered not just 1 beer, but 2. And that was so that in case the waiter wasn't there when I wanted my second one, I would be able to have it. And the waiter said to me, "Oh, excuse me, sir." He said, "I'm sorry, but I can't serve you alcohol." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, last night one of our waiters served someone who was underage, and we had our license suspended." I said, "Come on, we're getting out of here." And I made each one of my children get up, get back into the car, strapped into their car seats and so on. My wife, who, God knows, had so much to do, and it was such a hardship for her. But it didn't seem to matter to me at that time, because I wanted to have my beers, and I was making myself more important than everyone else. And we drove off and went to another restaurant. And I can remember thinking that night as I went to sleep how ashamed I was. My wife tried to talk to me a little bit about it, but I would have none of it. I was right, and that's just what the ego always makes you. It makes you right. And that night, that experience that I had at 4:05 a.m. the next day, not only did it get me off of alcohol, it probably saved my life. It transformed my life in so many different ways. And it was all because I was open to it. You don't believe that?
Sounds like more sitting around until some sort of epiphany comes to you.
It's not about waiting around. You know, in the Tao, one of the great lessons that I learned is that it teaches us how to be soft, how to be flexible, how to not be always in control. One of the great teachings of the Tao says that let yourself be lived by it.
But you didn't do anything.
That's the whole point. That's the place you want to get to, where you just allow. In the recovery movement, it's called letting go and letting God. Allowing this source that is always flowing through each and every one of us to do and perform its magic. And that magic will always work in our best interest if we just surrender to it. If you could just stop interfering in your own life and just let yourself be done. If you can get to that place, nothing will be left undone. Everything that you need will be there for you. It's mysterious for most of us because we believe that we're the ones who have to do everything. Isn't it interesting that you had everything you needed in the first 9 months? Why isn't that true for the next 90 years? Because we interfere. When I was 19 years old, I was in the United States Navy and as an enlisted man. And I was given my assignment to join the aircraft carrier, the USS Ranger. And it was on deployment in Yokosuka, Japan. So I boarded a refrigerator ship, the USS Vega, in Alameda, California. And just as I was getting on that ship to take my 29-day voyage across the Pacific Ocean, my Uncle Bill Volek, who was a school teacher in Hayward, California, handed me a copy of a book. And the book was a collection of short stories written by Leo Tolstoy. He wrote not just great novels and great stories, but great spiritual literature as well. He was considered to be the soul of Russia. And the first story in this collection was called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Now, Ivan Ilyich was a judge who lived in Moscow. One of the more important features of this story is his relationship to his wife, who he basically hated because he despised his work. And he felt that she had pressured him and pushed him into doing this, that it was a prestigious thing to do. And he was filled with internal rage and anger at what he had done. The title of the story kind of gives it away, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. You know he's going to die. Now, Ivan Ilyich was lying on his deathbed, and his wife is holding his hand, this woman that basically he despised for all of his life. And he looks up into her eyes, and his last words are, "What if my whole life has been wrong?" And he died. I was very shaken and very moved by that. And I took out a pad of paper, and I wrote a note to myself. And I said, "Dear Wayne, don't die with your music still in you." And I've lived that for my entire life. When you die, you will return to that source, and you will be in that space of love. But the Tao says that you don't have to die to get there. You can die to the ego and live from that space of perfect love while you're here. That vivid, surprising, benevolent, enduring quality that defines the quantum moment that leads us into the shift is really an indication that you're returning back to the source. You're beginning to live from the Tao. It's reconnecting with the field of intention. In Greek, the word enthusiasm breaks down to entheos-iasm, which means the God within. When you have passion, when you have enthusiasm for something inside of you, that's really God speaking to you and saying to you, don't get to the end of your life and have to be able to say what Ivan Ilyich said, "What if my whole life has been wrong?" I can't think of a greater tragedy than that.
I'm good. Dr. Dyer, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are men and women different when it comes to this? Do they shift differently?
It's very different, as a matter of fact. There's some recent studies that have just been published on that. I'd be happy to share them with you if you like.
That would be great.
Okay, super.
All right, I'm taking off.
Okay, man, I'll catch up with you.
So there was this incredible study done. It's I've got it right here. It's called The Moment That Turns Your Values Upside Down. And there's 4 components to it. There's men and women before and after. Now, before one of these quantum moments, they were asked just to list the most important priorities of their life, from the most important to the least important. Now, for men, the very first and most important value that they had learned was wealth, the accumulation of money. It's not really that big a surprise, because we are taught as men when we're growing up that your job is to support your family, your job is to get ahead. And the second most important value for all of these men was a sense of adventure, to go out there and, you know, conquer the world.
Be the guy.
Yeah, absolutely, be the macho guy. The third was achievement. You know, as men, we're raised to believe that you are what you do, what you accomplish, what you're able to create. The fourth is the idea of pleasure. You know, going out with the guys, getting as many dates as you can, having as much fun as you possibly can. The fifth of these is to be respected, all right? And we all know as men what that means, you know? You're not giving me any respect, man. And then you get out there, and when you're growing up and you're a kid, and if you don't get respect, you're having fights. Here are the top priorities of our lives, you know, be able to make money, to have a sense of adventure, to have, you know, to achieve, to feel pleasure, to be respected. That's basically the morning of our life.
This sounds like...
Appreciate that. All right. So the second part of this study, which is the after. A quantum shift has taken place. Same questions, only it's many years later, and they followed this over a lifetime. And the number one value is spirituality. Spirituality. The number one thing. It has gone from making money to spirituality, which wasn't even on the list before. You can't even find it. I've got the top 15 of them listed right here. It's not even on there. The second one is personal peace, less anxiety, less stress, if you will. The third one is family. Now, family was on the other list, but it was way down before. Now, what happens after one of these moments, you begin to look around and say, what is it that's important to me in my life? And then the next is God's will. This is the one that says, I have a sense of purpose. And then honesty is the fifth quality. Not just honest that I don't steal, but how honest am I as a man, you know, with my feelings, with yeah, that's exactly right, you know. Those are the top qualities for men. So there's the before and there's the after. You can see what a significant change this is, what a shift has taken place here.
Okay.
I know what you're going to ask. I can already tell.
Yeah. What's the deal with the women?
Bring it on.
For women, it's even more astonishing. Before one of these quantum moments, the number one value is family. And it's not surprising because women are kind of raised in our society, in our culture, to be a good mother, to be a good daughter, to support your family, to take care of your children and so on. The second one, which may surprise you, was a sense of independence, of feeling as if I would like to feel independent.
Women are very conflicted.
Yeah, makes sense.
The third was career. Now, very often, women never even felt that they had a right to go for a career because they were obligated to be taking care of their family. And this is not a put-down of that at all. What we're saying here is that there's something more. The fourth quality for women was fitting in, having to be like everybody else and so on. Yeah. And then finally, attractiveness. And this became not just like it's nice to look nice, but my whole values are, and how do I look, and where do we get this?
You know what? That is so scary when you break it down like that, because where is it that we learn as women we're supposed to be pleasing everybody else all the time?
Well, go on the newsstand. You know, all you see are magazines with pictures of girls with waists this big and, you know, with implants, lots of emphasis on makeup, having the right labels, carrying the right bags and so on. So these became the top qualities or characteristics or values for women before one of these shifts.
Well, I hope the after list is better.
Their values shift dramatically. The number one value for women after having this experience, it's right here, is my own personal growth. Now remember, before it was like taking care of everybody else, doing the right thing, fitting in, and now it's all of a sudden, how am I growing as a human being? How do I feel about myself? The second is a sense of self-esteem. Am I worth anything? How do I feel about myself? Am I a valuable human being? The third one is spirituality. My sense of my connectedness to something bigger and greater than myself. And then happiness. Again, this wasn't even on the list. It was almost at the bottom of the list before. How often have women been raised to believe that their happiness isn't an important thing, that doing what they are supposed to do rather than feeling, you know, a sense of, I'm entitled to be happy. And then a very interesting one, it's called forgiveness. This became very important in their lives. Forgiveness.
That's good, because then you can forgive all those people that gave you bad information about what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of resentment that begins to take place in people. It's what so many people just go along with. Oh,
Right.
Joe.
This is great.
Hey, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is great. We should be filming this.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. I don't know, would you guys like to hear, I think maybe the only true miracle that ever happened to me in my life.
A real miracle?
Yeah, it was an authentic miracle for me. It was a healing that took place that I still can't explain. So it was in the year 2000, and I had taken a group of 25 people on a spiritual tour to Assisi. I've made several visits there. In fact, I wrote an entire book called There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, based upon the prayer of St. Francis. And I lectured for a couple of hours about it, and we all had visited the places where St. Francis had lived and performed so many of his miracles. The next day, we were going to take a tour to a place called San Damiano, where St. Clare, who was the first female to ever become a part of the Franciscans, lived. And on the third floor there was the bedroom, exactly as it was in the 13th century. There was a young man on that trip. He was 21 years old. His name was John. He was from Pennsylvania. He had cerebral palsy, and he had two very heavy braces on each one of his legs. We were going to go up to the third floor. Now, this was a winding staircase to get up to the third level where St. Clare's bedroom was. So John, in order to be able to go up the steps, he would have to move his leg out like this, you could imagine, and then he would go up the step, and then he'd bring the other one down, and then he'd go up the next step, and he would bring it back because his legs were stiff. But as we started to get into the very narrow part of the of the staircase, he couldn't, his legs wouldn't go out. He could only go this far, so he couldn't go up. And you can imagine he couldn't go down. It was impossible for him to go down. So there he was stuck. I was ahead of him. And he stopped me and he said, Wayne, I'm in trouble. I can't go up another step because I can't get my leg out to the side. There's no room and I can't go back down. What are we going to do? And there was a whole row of people behind waiting to go up this very narrow staircase. So you have the picture? So I said to him, without even thinking, John, what I want you to do is just strap yourself on over my back and put your arms around my neck and just lean over and I will carry you up these steps. Now, what I haven't told you is that before we went on this trip, I had done some major damage to this right knee of mine, to a point where I had it examined by several orthopedic physicians, and I was told that there would come a time soon when I would have to have this knee replaced because it was down to bone on bone. So as he got on my back, and now we're talking about 240 pounds or so, he went, I went about 3 steps and I realized that my knee was about to collapse and I was going to go straight down. And I had a quick vision of what the newspapers and the CC Daily News were going to say the next morning. Spiritual teacher collapses, bottom of the stairs, 40 people dead. You know, it was like, and so as my knee started to go down, at that moment, I saw a vision of St. Francis. I had a vision of what he would look like, and he didn't say a word. It was very, very quick, and he just went like this with his hands. In other words, stand up. And suddenly, and I had the fragrance of roses was in there, the same fragrance that I had, remember in the story I told you? In that quantum moment when I had that, the same kind of thing. And I stood up, and I started walking up the steps with him, and my knee just suddenly righted itself. It was fine. Not only did it right itself, but I suddenly had like a burst of energy like I've never had before. And I started walking faster with him on my back. Then I started running. And I ran up all of the stairs. My wife was waiting at the top, and she said, "What happened to you? And what are you doing? And everybody else is out of breath." And I said, I had a miracle. I just don't know what happened. And I realized that my knee didn't hurt anymore at all, and I wasn't limping, and I had no pain in it at all. By the way, I've never had any surgery and anything ever done to this knee. It was a healing that had taken place in that moment. Later on, I started to talk about this miracle, but the thing that I did was, when people would ask me, why do you think it happened to you? I would always say, well, why not? I mean, I'm Wayne Dyer, after all. And I've written an entire book about him. And
I deserve a miracle.
Yeah, and it was like, and I really believed that it was like a special sort of thing that came to me. That's what happens, you know, when you get your ego involved in it. And what happened in that moment is that I totally forgot my ego. It wasn't that I'm so grand and so spiritual or that I'm so special. My instantaneous reaction to what John needed was to just reach out to him, and that's when the miracle occurred. In one moment, without thinking, I reached out to a fellow human being in need and forgot about myself. And it was almost as if the door opened, the teachers found me and said, here it is. The best way to have those doors open is to forget about yourself and to reach out and serve. It's always about serving. It's, you know, one of the mistakes so many people make is they just think, well, I'm just going to attract what I want into my life. And one of the things that I really profoundly believe in, you do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. What you are.